can all join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Dharma Bum Temple. Hopefully that's where you intended to be right now. Otherwise, you're at the wrong place. What brings you here? Why? Why show up here? I know I don't usually ask questions right away, but now I've put you all on the spot. Why show? Go ahead. Yeah.
Community, Sangha.
Community, Sangha. Be reminded to think good thoughts, speak good words, and do good deeds. That's a good reminder. You should put that on like a bumper sticker or something. Why else show up here?
Meditate in a group.
Meditate in a group? Yeah, that's a funny one because, so you meditate by yourself and in a group. Is it different for you?
I think just having the intention of just being here with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. No right or wrong, just exploration. Here you can't really get up and turn on the TV. I mean, I guess you could. You probably have a phone within 3 inches of you. 4 inches, thank you. But it is interesting when we go somewhere, wherever it is to meditate, it takes away a lot of the distractions that potentially at our immediate disposal. Even though ultimately it should be the same, it's not for a lot of people. And so the practice is really to see where and how you sit differently, and what it's like sitting at home, what it's like sitting here, what it's like sitting anywhere you go, really. Yeah, Trey.
I was just going to say it calms my monkey brain at the end of the day at work. So,
Calms the monkey mind.
yes.
Yeah. Anyone's mind race all day long, just thinking and thinking and thinking? Anyone think that's ever going to stop? No, thank you. There you go. Once you actually recognize that the mind is never going to shut off, and this is my routine, I say every time I lead meditation, I've been saying this probably 5 times a week for the last 12 years, that once you realize the mind will never stop racing, this practice becomes a little bit easier. Because you begin to go away from thinking that anything is actually going to happen to you. So it is learning to just sit and be with whatever mess you have. What else? Anyone want to share maybe why they're here? Yeah.
I enjoy your wit.
My wit. Yeah, the funny thing is, I like to be funny. To me, the greatest teachers I've learned from, whether it was in person or Shunner Suzuki for one, who obviously I'd never met, he built San Francisco Zen Center, but he was just a funny guy. And I think humor is important just in life in general, and it was a funny thing because during the pandemic, when we were closed for 16 months. And some of you may have heard me say this, but I was stuck. And I don't do the Zoom class, I just do YouTube. So Zoom, at least you have other little like Brady Bunch squares to look at. But on YouTube, when I stare at the YouTube thing right now, the only thing I'm staring at is me. And then where I was filming it from, there was actually a mirror behind that. So then I was looking at like the mirror, looking at me, looking at that, looking at me. And it was really weird. And it was also really difficult, day in and day out to like get as motivated and inspired. It's really challenging. And the hardest part was because I do try to like make people laugh and cry at the same time and make jokes. When you're talking to yourself and you're trying to make people laugh, it's really difficult. And then I noticed here, it's like, okay, well, it's kind of the same thing because normally you can see smiles and now I can't. So it's fascinating how we get so stuck in patterns and behaviors and expectations. And part of this is just the awareness of that, that you say something that you intend to have some reaction, and yet all you see is these blank eyes staring back at you, So while I may say something that I think might be funny, I'm really thinking like, wow, did I just piss this person off? You don't know. So, yeah. See, like that. All right. So now that Evan and Montana have arrived, we will go ahead and start the meditation practice. We were waiting for y'all. It's good to have you back. A couple things to tell you before we begin with the meditation practice. Nothing's going to happen to you. Right? You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. You're not going to figure anything out whatsoever. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Okay, don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? You're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. You're just going to sit. You're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. Posture. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or a chair, however you're sitting, also just trying to relax your shoulders, keeping the back straight. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, don't expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders. Jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. And with the body still, resting, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, hold the hands, or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppatam, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation just helps you become aware of that, so you can then actually make changes in your life. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. And that's why it's such a simple practice. You just have to wake up and be nice to people all day long. Yet we sure do complicate that somehow. Not any of you, I'm sure. Everyone in here was nice to everybody you encountered all day long, right? I don't know, maybe you locked yourself in a room or something. You know, I talked earlier at the beginning, based on the comment about, wit and humor, that for me, part of this practice, and when I look at the Buddhist teachings, it's not about learning about anything outside of yourself. To me, Buddhist practice has always been like a mirror, and you hold up the mirror and it's a reflection back on you. And that's it. And so when we have an opportunity to sit quietly and use the mind and go through our day and use the mind almost as if everything is a reflection back on us, then that allows us to become a little more aware of that genuine, authentic self that we are, whatever that may be. And part of that, I think, is being able to laugh at yourself sometimes. Find humor in the ignorance. Not that any of you are ignorant, I'm talking about myself. But being able to almost look at just how ridiculous it is that it is so hard to be nice. It's actually not that hard. It's really, really simple. We just can't do it. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That's the heart of the Buddhist practice. Karma, which means action, which is what we bring into the world, as the Buddha taught, is generated through body, speech, and mind. It's what we think, what we say, and what we do creates the environment around us. And if we're mindful of thoughts, if we're mindful of words, and if we're mindful of actions, then hopefully we're creating an environment around us that's a little kinder and gentler than maybe what we've created in the past. And in that process of recognizing, no matter how many Buddhist books you read, or no matter how many Buddhist classes you go to, no matter how many meditations you do, or no matter how all that stuff, it is still really, really difficult to be nice to yourself and everybody else all day long. And you can either hate yourself for that and be really disappointed and think you're like a bad Buddhist or something like that, or you can just recognize that, yeah, this path is not easy. I wrote something the other day, and I've shared this before, but that to me, Buddhist practice, putting it into your life is probably the most difficult thing for me that I've ever had to do. Because it is really asking yourself to completely change a lot of the ways that we have acted and behaved in the past. And a lot of people don't like change, especially when it comes to having to change ourselves. Because it would be a lot easier if everybody else would just change and do everything we want them to. All right? That would be simpler. Then we don't have to change anything. We can just, make sure everybody does what we want, and then we'll always be happy. But the reality is that life doesn't work that way. So it requires us to, again, look at ourselves and say, how can I make change? What thoughts, words, and actions that I bring into my day can I look at changing? And that is a lifelong process. It's not a 6-week course and then you're done. Unfortunately, it's your daily practice. And practice is often challenging because the conditions around us, the environments that we are surrounded by all day long are not always conducive to making sure that we cultivate spiritual practice. All right. So we have to try to find a balance with your own livelihood and daily routine, which might not be surrounding yourselves with people who are telling you to think good thoughts, speak good words, and do good deeds all day long, right? They're telling you other things. And yet, again, we come back to ourselves. What's my role in this practice? And that's where, for me, to kind of wrap this up, that I found humor incredibly important, because the alternative was to just be so frustrated or miserable or angry at the fact that I still have unpleasant thoughts or words or actions. It's like, I've been at this a long time. Shouldn't you have it figured out by now? So that's where I laugh. Like, God, I'm such an idiot. Like, how hard could this be? It says it right there, one line. And it's so hard. So with that, I'll pause. I always prefer just to open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we use the rest of the time to address what's on your mind. Yes, sir.
Can you explain some of the iconography on the altar?
I can. The question was, can I explain some of the iconography on the altar? I can. We'd be here about 3 hours if I explained all of it. So I'll sum it up for you. Well, let me say this first, and then I have a question. I'll have a question back to you. Anytime you go to any Buddhist temple, the altar, the shrine, the setup is always going to be different. If you go to a Japanese Buddhist temple, or a Vietnamese Buddhist temple, or a Thailand Buddhist temple, Taiwanese Buddhist temple, each culture is going to, this is not just for you, but for everybody who might be new, they're all going to show things and express things differently. Buddhism from India, 2,500 years ago, about 100, 200 years after the Buddha died, it goes south into Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. You have the development of what's called Theravada Buddhism. About 500, 600 years later, it goes north China, Japan, Korea, you have the development of Mahayana Buddhism. About 1,000 years after he died, it goes into Tibet, and you have Vajrayana Buddhism. So you have three major schools of Buddhism. And as Buddhism has spread for 2,500 years, obviously it meshes. Someone brought this up on Saturday. I talked about it for a bit. But as Buddhism enters a new culture, as it always has, it meshes with that existing culture. And so that's one of the reasons that you have such different looks, different feels, different sounds, different chants, different words, different everything in every temple you go to. And again, for anyone who might be brand new, it's not like the Buddha said, verse 7, line 8, when you set up a Buddhist shrine, it should look like this. The Buddha actually, at the time of the Buddha, didn't even want statues made of him. It wasn't until years later that after he died, that they came together and they said, we really should have an image of the Buddha to represent like the Buddha. I think, and I'm making this up, but I'm making up everything, but I'm definitely making up this part. There was laughter, thanks. There was my personal view on that, for whatever it's worth, not much, but was that they kind of got together and were like, well, if he's dead and what if this dies out? We want something that's going to survive. So they decided to make an image, but the Buddha, just being a person, not a god, nothing like that, didn't want that. But what they decided to make was an image of, anyone know the first image of the Buddha? The feet. The very first image ever made, statue if you will, but just a physical image of the Buddha, was the 2 feet side by side. And it represented that as the Buddha taught, and as he walked and taught, the teachings also would spread after he died. So those are the first images, were the footprints of the Buddha. The images of the Buddha became very important when Buddhism was going India, China. You could Google the Silk Road. A lot of beautiful teaching, Xuanzang, the different monks and teachers, translators that travel the Silk Road, spreading the teachings. But they were going through Mongolia, and they would bring monks with them for protection. The traders on the Silk Road, like merchants, not the traders like, you did bad, but the merchants. And the monks would bring little images of the Buddha. And so historically, the first thing that enters into a new culture when Buddhism spreads is the actual image of the Buddha. Way before the teachings, way before religion, way before anything like that, people begin to see the images of the Buddha. I remember 20 years ago, maybe not that long, maybe it was that long, I was downtown, and if anyone's been in San Diego long enough, anyone remember the Z Gallery that used to be downtown on 5th and Market, right? I walked by Z Gallery one day, the heart of the Gaslamp, and there's this Samantabhadra Bodhisattva statue in the window. And I was like, wow, Buddhism has arrived, And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder who the buyer was for Z Gallery that put a Samantabhadra Buddha in the window. And then I realized, they had no idea who it was. They just saw something that looked Buddhist. They threw it in the window, and they're like, yes, the local people are going to love that. They'll buy it, right? So the images are what people like to see. They've always played an important part. Point out one image and ask me about it.
Well, there's obviously the lotus blossom, and I know that has a lot to do with it.
All right, we'll start there. The lotus blossom, the lotus flower. So the last thing I'll say is, before I say that, when we put the Dharma Bum Temple together, nearly 15 years ago, the idea was that we were young American folks. We were trying to introduce Buddhism into a local culture, and we were not coming from a specific Buddhist lineage, right? Taiwanese Buddhist background, but we weren't trying to start a Taiwanese Buddhist temple or a Japanese Buddhist temple or a Vietnamese Buddhist temple. We just wanted to open a Buddhist place and share all the different schools of Buddhism. So everything up here and everything around the temple has always represented the different schools and different traditions of Buddhism. So we've got, Ganesh Hindu god statues up here. We have a Thai representation. From Thailand, we have very traditional Taiwanese Buddhist statues, right? We have some Japanese images. So there's a little bit of everything up here. Specifically lotus, the lotus flower in Buddhist teachings, think about the lotus flower. Lotus flower starts in the mud. And out of the mud blossoms a beautiful flower. Anyone's mind often sit in the mud, right? So just like the lotus flower that blossoms out of the beautiful mud, our mind with practice can blossom out of the mud. There's a Thich Nhat Hanh expression. It says, no mud, no lotus. And what that means, right, a lot of people who've been around it might have seen it or heard it, or we have, it's actually downstairs, but in the sendo there, that represents exactly what I'm speaking about, that without that mud that we think of as gross and, not so great, you don't get the beautiful flower. So without going through all of the mess of a mind and the emotional struggles and challenges and difficulties and traumas, without really feeling and going through all of that, it's hard to have a really beautiful spiritual journey. It's almost like the deeper we fall, the greater we can feel as we go forward. So you will very often, not always, but very often, even if you look at the tankas there, you will very often see the Buddha sitting on the lotus flower, which ultimately represents the compassion. So the beautiful mind that can awaken. Yeah. You want to do a second one and then I'll move on?
Sure.
Big one.
Hand gestures.
The hand gesture, on the Kuan Yin and the big one in the middle?
Do that one then.
Yeah, that one or a different one?
I don't know. I can't see.
All right, I'll just talk about hand gestures in general. So when the Buddha was, for 21 days, he sat under the Bodhi tree. He's 29, he leaves home. 6 years, he roams the base of the Himalayan mountains. And at 35, he sits down under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, India, and says, I'm not leaving until I figure out why I'm suffering. And so it's said that he sat for 21 days, didn't move, and he went through all kinds of challenges and difficulties sitting there. And in the story, Mara comes to him. Mara is his mind. All right? In the story, it's like a person, like a monster. And Mara does all kinds of things. One of the things Mara does is Mara shoots arrows at him, and he's sitting in jhana. He's sitting in meditation posture. And as Mara shoots arrows at him, his hand goes up. The arrows turn to lotus petals. They fall to the ground. He returns to meditation. What this teaches us is with stillness and with fear, overcoming fear, what we're afraid of could actually become something beautiful. Another thing Mara does is Mara begins to rain hail, thunderstorm down on him. And a king cobra, a naga, comes up to him and coils underneath him, gives him a seat. Seven-headed, covers him for protection. Right? I don't know about you, but if a seven-headed king cobra comes up to me, I'm probably not just sitting there still. And that's what happens. That's what the Buddha did. So he sat. It gave him a seat off of the ground, and it covered him to protect him. Again, the teachings show us that what we fear, if we shift our minds slightly, maybe could protect us. Think about that when you look at all the things that you fear in life. Very often what we fear, if we change our perception of it, the fear can go away. It can decrease. Often fear is our inability to embrace ultimate truth. Fear of death. If nobody told you by now, we are all going to die. So your fear of it almost keeps you afraid from living. Right? Often we're so afraid of this death thing that we're not even living. So the things we fear, if we shift our mind, can actually change. Understanding the impermanence of everything, right? So one more mudra is the earth-touching mudra. And so after the Buddha gets, and at this time he's just, sitting. And Mara comes up to him and says, who bears witness to you defeating me? And he moves from jhana, meditation, touches the earth to show that the earth was his witness. And then Mara went away and he became enlightened. So beautiful stories. They're stories. I tend to look at stories as stories, metaphors. Whether a 7-headed cobra actually came up and gave the Buddha a seat, I don't really care. Personally, it doesn't really matter to me. I love the messages that are coming from these practices. So these are called mudras, and if you just Googled mudra, M-U-D-R-A, you'll see all kinds of different mudras and the representations of them. And also recognizing that Buddhism, Hinduism, there'll be lots of different interpretations of mudras. Another beautiful one is where the hands are together like this, and that represents the turning of the Dharma wheel, the teachings as they go. So, yeah, endless. I just realized that the website has a description of everything up here. I should have just told you that at the beginning. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yes. So, yeah.
So there's this idea kind of been sitting with, on one hand, life gets simpler when you stop trying to change everything. On the other hand, the times where I'm most fulfilled and happiest is when I'm helping others in a way changing. And then there's definitely been times where I thought I was helping people, but maybe it wasn't the most helpful. Do you have any thoughts on how to skillfully help others?
Great question. To retell it or paraphrase it for our millions of YouTube followers, I think what you're asking about is there's been times when you've helped people and maybe it's been helpful. There have been times when you've helped people and maybe it's been not so helpful. Also recognizing that as we try to change, it's challenging and creates this almost opportunity to ask ourselves, is what I'm doing in changing, is it actually helping people? Is that roughly what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah, close enough? All right. Have you heard my snail story? If you did, it would have been a long time ago.
A long time ago.
All right. So I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories. It's actually probably my favorite story, which addresses exactly what you're talking about. When I was a kid, I used to step on lots of snails. I don't know why. My walkway where I grew up, going up the walkway to the front step, anytime the sprinklers were on, or especially with the rain or whatever, snails would come out. And as a 7, 8-year-old kid, I just liked stepping on snails. Fast forward, probably 20 years from there, and I start getting into Buddhism. 28 years old, 29, 30 years old, and I start going to this Buddhist temple. This was 2003. And all of a sudden, I'm listening to some talk. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something about a talk about non-harming, non-killing, having compassion, etc. And all of a sudden, 20-something years later, I'm just sitting there with this tremendous feeling of guilt and shame for all the snails I used to kill when I was younger. So I'm brand new to Buddhism at this time, and I went on this 2-year Save the Snail crusade, right? And every time I saw snails, I would pick them up and I would move them and I'd pat myself in the back and I'm feeling really good. I'm yes, I'm saving the snails, in my head thinking I'm making up for all the snails I killed. I'm assigning so much meaning to this. But the bottom line is I thought I was doing something good. I thought I was actually saving these snails' lives because I was moving them off the sidewalk. So this continued for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, I don't even know what it was, but something hit me. And all of a sudden I was oh my God, you're such an idiot. You actually think you're saving the snail's life because you moved the snail 3 feet? How ignorant is that? How much power do I think I actually have, right? So let's break this down for a minute, especially with your engineering type mind. You have a pathway. When there's a snail on a pathway, what does that mean? You can see it. I'm thinking, well, let's move the snail off the pathway into the grass so this snail is safe. Well, people walk on the grass also, right? And when they're in the grass, then you can't see them. Not only that, how do I know where the snail was going to begin with? So here's the snail cruising along. I pick up the snail and I move the snail 3 feet this way. And the snail's like, man, I was trying to go over there. Look how far I just trekked just to get here. And you, dumb whatever, moved me over here. Now I got to go back. And now on the snail's journey to go all the way back this way, they get squashed. You know who's karmically responsible for that? This guy. My action, my karma, messed with the snails, thinking that I knew what was best for the snail. I don't know anything about the snail. I don't know where the snail's going. I don't know what their intentions are. But I think, well, I'm this human and I'm much bigger than this tiny snail, so I must know what's best. So after that happened, I eventually evolved to a place where when I see a snail, I join palms. I say Omitofo, which for me, it's Amitabha Buddha. It's a blessing. I leave the snail alone because I have no idea what's best. And that will trigger a million other questions about, like, well, then how do you ultimately help people? I think the real thing that I learned from my master about helping people is look at your intention. If your intention is to benefit yourself, then you're coming really from the wrong view. Looking at the Eightfold Path, the first one is a correct view. If your intention is to help yourself, then you're probably not coming from the best view. If your intention is to help others, then you're probably closer to pure intention. But we have to have some discernment and some wisdom where we ask ourselves, do we really know what's best? And that's really difficult. Now, I'm not suggesting a parent, for example, just turns to a 7-year-old child and says, you're on your own, right? There's discernment that is required here. And as we continue to practice and cultivate moving through ego and concept of self and all this stuff that we think we know, I believe we get closer to understanding what is ultimate wisdom and how can we determine what is best and how do we help people the best way. Because clearly the practice is not about saying, well, I know nothing, so I can't help you. However, with Travis standing here, I won't make a knock on Theravada Buddhism because I don't want to do that. But there are 2 major schools of Buddhism. Well, 3 really. One, the Mahayana path is the Bodhisattva path. The Bodhisattva path is enlightened beings. The practice is that you continue to help people along the way. They fall, you help them get up. Maybe you're not actually doing good for them in the long run, but you think it's good, so you're helping them get up as you're working through your own karmic misery and challenge. You're engaged. The Theravada practice, which is really beautiful, is more of like, hey, I'm unenlightened. I don't know what's best. I'm going to retreat forest style. I'm going to work on my own wisdom. And only then would I really know what to do. You know, the old Buddha for you, we used to get so many Thai monks that would come in, and we'd always ask them, a Thai monk there in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, we'd always ask them to teach, and they would just look at us and laugh. They're like, teach? I have nothing to teach you. I'm just living my life as a simple monk. Mahayana Buddhists, lay Buddhists, Zen practitioners, man, we can't wait to throw a bunch of stuff at you. So, yes. Glad that solved it for you. Anything else? One more question before we wrap up. Yeah.
Well, I will just say, I think intention is really, I think there's a different karmic result when you're like trying to kill these snails and when you're trying to help them and you're living them. So, you know, the way that I kind of let myself off the hook sometimes is to is to feel like I do have the right intention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna always act right or say the right thing,
Yeah.
or it's just like forgiveness. Sometimes it's really hard to forgive, but if you have the intention of it, you're on the right path. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really key thing that you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and just to kind of, for anyone who didn't hear what Molly said, is that really focusing on the intention part, that how critical it is to be aware of what that intention is, and if that intention is coming from a good place. Because, I mean, let's just bring it down to a very practical level. We are going to go through the rest of our lives determining when and how we're going to help people, right? I don't think anyone's going to hear this talk and be like, okay, I'm just going to stop helping people now. So what we kind of have to default to very often is, what is the intention? And come back to that always. Yeah. Anything else before we close? And the intention one is a really wonderful practice to wake up and do each day. As you're starting to do anything, I mean, it can be as simple as, if you're fortunate enough and, you know, if you have the ability to wake up and make breakfast, just say, what is my intention right here? My intention is to eat. And then you go to brush your teeth. What is my intention here? My intention is to clean my teeth. And you start to ask yourself, just with everyday simple things, putting shoes on, what is my intention here? To have shoes on, like real little things. But when you begin to ask yourself and become aware of your intention behind simple everyday actions or tasks, or then as you begin to develop that habit of, why am I doing this? Then you start to, or you can start to apply that to things that are maybe, I mean, I guess food and brushing your teeth is important, but, you know, larger things in life that really challenge us, or real difficulties, or conversations, or relationships, or work situations, things that are really challenging. You can ask yourself, what is my intention with this? What do I want out of this conversation? And when you explore your intention behind everything you do, it's kind of mind-blowing, often scary, often a little, waking up to how selfish we are can be a little, eye-opening. And if you're not aware of how selfish we are, then this is a great practice for you. Because we begin to recognize that a majority of our thoughts throughout our day are really to take care of one person and one person only. So, and when we realize that, then we begin to maybe shift and think, okay, my intention is to eat, to feed myself, but wow, what if my intention was to wake up and also make sure that everybody else has food? What can I do to contribute to that? So awareness of intention leads to just incredible, I think, potential changes in how you live your life. So, all right, with that, I'll close. So we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the more than 4 million lives that have been lost during the pandemic, and to their family and friends who continue to suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a couple quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple, like I said, nearly 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist teachings to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers. We're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Just about every night we have different practices going on from different Buddhist traditions. We closed 16 months ago, March 12, 2020. Actually, it's longer than that now. We reopened July 10th, so we've been open almost, 7 weeks or something like that. It's been beautiful to be open. Since we've opened, obviously, we've changed some things. We always appreciate everybody. We have you spread apart, how we're sitting. We have you all in masks. We scan for your social security number at the door. We're really trying to do what we can to make it comfortable for those who are here taking care of this place and for those who show up. And nobody here probably wants to be squeezed in with 70, 80 other people right now. So we appreciate you following kind of the protocol and guidelines that we've set in place. It allows us to even open. We only have in-person classes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, and then Saturday morning. And then our recovery Sangha downstairs right now at 7 p.m., as well as Sunday morning. And then Monday through Friday, we do in-person 8 and 8:30. It's just a silent meditation. You can come for 30 minutes, you can come for the hour, or whatever it is. And then the temple's closed all day. Same thing with Buddha for You. It's open Saturday, Sunday, 12 to 3, and an hour before the evening class, and that's it. So everything else is on Zoom or YouTube. And we're just glad we can be here at all. I think that's about it. Nothing out of the ordinary going on. So thanks for being here. Please be safe. And as you head home tonight, just watch your intention. See why you're doing what you're about to go do. What is the reason? And when you do this, don't judge yourself. Because if you start asking yourself the intention of why you're doing something, and like 98% of the things you're going to do the rest of the night might be for you, you might potentially feel like, I'm so bad. No, you're human. You're a work in progress like we all are. So don't judge yourself. Just be aware of it and see how we can work on maybe being a little bit less about us and a little bit more about others. So thanks all.
Good.